sa President's budget, 232 billion ang level nito. Ang ending sa ating BICAM report, 144 billion. So, ano to, mga 88 billion pesos din po yung na-free up natin. Tama po? Ang gusto sabihin, ang dami na natin na-free up. So,
Mr. President, it's true that compared to the NEP, there may have been a decrease, but bearing in mind also that compared to 2024, there's been an increase. And we know that for a fact that the increase can cover the current needs for personal benefits and pensions.
yes, Mr. President. Pero yun lang, I'm just looking up, I'm just pointing out the fiscal space that Congress has freed up under programmed appropriations. Yun po, that's what I'm pointing out. And bago malimutan, we also freed up 74 billion pesos, 74.4 billion pesos sa Philhealth subsidy. Tama po yun, which is under programmed appropriations. Tama po?
Yes, Mr. President.
Why did we have to do that, Mr. President? Sa dami na ng... hindi pa tayo makakame up ng total amount of the fiscal space which we have freed up sa programmed appropriations because hindi natin alam yung how much of the 373 billion of new items under unprogrammed appropriations came from program. Hindi pa natin alam eh. But we will add to that the MPBF, we add to that the PGF na mga freed amounts, plus the 74 of the Philhealth. Kinailangan pa ba natin na i-zero talaga si Philhealth to free up 74 billion pesos, Mr. President?
I know, Mr. President, that's also the question of many. And I've thought about this long and hard. And there's no denying that Philhealth has a savings amount of 600 billion, Mr. President. And that's also the reason why initially the administration thought of it as a way also to augment certain short fundings that we had, for example, for health workers, etc. Hindi natin maintindihan ba't hindi nila ginagamit yung pera na nandun na meron sila na nakaimbak sa isang, ewan ko kung anong klaseng account yan, savings account, na ang kinikita ay mas mababa pa kesa sa inflation. Mr. President, hindi pwedeng sisihin na nagkulang tayo sa pagbibigay sa kanila. Kasi nga ang daming ang pera na nandyan. Hindi nila pinamimigay ang pera dun sa mga nangangailangan at tinuturuan din natin sila ng leksyon. Kung bigay ka ng bigay, nandun lang yung pera, hindi naman nagagamit. Paano naman yung mga ibang programa rin ng gobyerno na nangangailangan din ng funding? Yun nga yung sinasabi ko, pag meron kang, syempre, di ba, sinasabi natin, 5 yung anak mo, lahat yan kailangan pantay-pantay na mabigyan mo. Totoo yun. Pero sa lahat sa kanila, tinitignan mo rin kung sino may pangangailangan at sino naman ang may kakayanan na itayo rin ang kanyang sarili. Yun din ang sinasabi natin, it's a leadership problem also in Philhealth and it's a disbursement problem. Gaya nga ng sinabi ni Senator Cynthia, ang problema din sa Philhealth, hindi rin natin alam kung ano ba talaga yung mga benepisyo natin. Wala tayong card na nagsasabi hanggang dito o ganyan ang maibibigay sa'yo, ang tagal-tagal ng approval minsan, hindi alam ng mga ating mga kababayan kung paano sila makapag-comply dun sa mga requirements. So ito yung mga nagiging issue. Hindi sila kulang sa pera. At alam ko yung iba talagang pinagdidiinan ito. Pero 600 billion ang meron sila. Samantalang ang dami natin din pangangailangan pagdating sa edukasyon, pagdating sa infrastruktura. Alam mo, maganda talagang magbigay ng social protection, wealth transfer. Importante yan. Pero kailangan din natin ng wealth generating initiatives kasi hindi natin mapopondohan ang mga ibang bagay na magbibigay ng suporta sa ating mga kababayan kung ang gobyerno ay walang programa na magpapalago ng ating ekonomiya.
I'm reminded of the saying that health is wealth. But I don't think, Mr. President, that we can use funds meant for health so that we will justify this, that we will generate wealth for the nation.
Mr. President,
So,
the budget of the DOH has increased from last year. So it may not have been an item, for example, in particular for Philhealth. Pero meron naman pong increase na nangyari dito sa DOH from 241,602 in 2024, yung BICAM natin nasa 247,923. So we are, of course, health is wealth. That's very important. But also, health, the financial situation of our country, the economy, and wealth-generating initiatives are important so that we can support social protection initiatives such as the health sector.
sige, mag-digress po tayo muna sa health sector. Pero napansin ko po na ang ating final amount sa Department of Health is 247.9 billion pesos sa BICAM report. Mas mababa by 25.7 billion pesos from the GAB, 273.7 billion pesos. So, binawasan pa rin natin ang DOH. And then, ang ating pampalubag-loob lang ay yung level, nung binawasan na, yung ending amount is still higher than the 2024 GAA amount.
Yes, Mr. President.
But why did we reduce it, Mr. President, by 25.7 billion pesos, which is a very significant amount also, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, there are certain agencies that we also supported. Like, for example, the Department of Agrarian Reform, we had given them an increase for their budget. We also had given the state universities and colleges an increase in their budget. The DICT, we've also given them an increase. The Department of National Defense also has an increase. So, Mr. President, if possible, we would like to increase all. But then also because of the substantial budget allocation of other departments, we also made sure that departments that are also crucial have a respectable amount that they can operate with.
So, pwede ba nating masabi na itong 74.4 billion pesos ng Philhealth na ziniro natin ay binigay sa ibang mga ahensya ng gobyerno na sa tingin natin ng ating committee na mas nangangailangan o mas deserving ng amount, at masasabi ba natin na hindi directly health-related yung napuntahan ng 74.4 billion pesos na yon, Mr. President?
Mr. President, hindi sa masasabi nating more deserving, more in need, perhaps.
Yes.
And then also, yes, I think I know where your next question will lead to. But yes, I think transparently you can look that if you look at the increase in some appropriations, they're not health-related.
Yes, they're not health-related. Ngayon, Mr. President, ang problema kasi yung timing din ng pagbaba natin eh. We want to teach them a lesson, pero 74.4 billion pesos tatanggalin natin, isi-zero natin. Pero hindi ba natin alam na pinasa natin dito sa chamber natin yung panukala na pababain ng premium rates. Nababa natin eh. At the same time, inutusan natin sila to increase their compensation packages, which ginawa nila. Tapos hindi lang dagdagan pa, may konsulta, etc. So, ang nangyayari po, Mr. President, we are being conservative with Philhealth by reducing the subsidy by 74.4 billion pesos at a time when when Philhealth has now committed to be more proactive, aggressive, and then we are returning some benefits to the direct contributors by lowering the contribution rate, Mr. President. Ganyan ang nangyari. Oh, so, parang hindi makatawiran yung makatwiran yung 74.4 billion pesos reduction, wrong timing pa. Oh, now that kung ano yung itinuturo natin sa PhilHealth, pinipressure natin sila, gagawin na nila, tapos ngayon parang pipilayan natin sila para magawa nila yung sinasabi natin gawin nila, Mr. President.
Mr. President, unang-una, hindi ako naniniwala na mapipilayan sila. Kasi nga may pagkukunan pa rin silang 600 bilyon. So sabihin na natin, 70 billion ang hindi na nalaan sa kanila ngayon sa budget. Meron naman silang pagkukunan na 600 bilyon. Ngayon, sa susunod na taon, kung talagang tinupad nila ang kanilang pangako na number 1, mas iigihan nila ang pagbigay ng suporta sa mga may sakit na nangangailangan. Pangalawa, na-implement na yung batas. Ewan ko kung napasa na ba yung batas na yon na bababaan yung premium at hindi na dapat kasama sa batas yung pag-increase ng premium na yon. At saka natin masasabi na, o sige, sa susunod na taon, 2026 budget, pwede na nating punuan muli sapagkat nagagamit na nila yung kanilang reserba.
Nakalimutan ko nga i-mention na pinush ko nga sila na magkaroon ng dental services at ngayon nababasa natin that they are also offering dental services, Mr. President.
Exactly, Mr.
to be
President.
covered.
I think this can be evaluated. For example, you have a child who has committed something, you're teaching your child a lesson, hindi naman porket na nag-reform na kaagad, ay ibibigay mo na muli. Kailangan mo nang patunayan rin na masusustain ito. Magagawa niya talaga ng tuloy-tuloy. Kaya nga, dito, uulitin ko, at alam ko marami rin ng magtataka dito, no? Pero 600 billion, may pera kang ganon. May mga ibang programa ng gobyerno na pwede ring pondohan. At hindi naman maghihirap ang PhilHealth dahil meron silang pagkukunan para bayaran. Ang problema nga nila noon, hindi nila ginagawa yon. Kaya ngayon, salamat sa inisyatibo nga, sinabi nga natin, yung ating minority leader, sinabi, dapat meron kayong dental benefits. O gagawin daw nila, o ginagawa na nila. O ngayon, may batas, pero hindi ko alam, parang hindi pa yata napapasa na hindi muna itataas ang premium, di ba? Hindi pa yan batas. Di ba? I-amyanda pa lang natin yan. Hindi pa yan nangyayari. So sa ngayon, ang daming nagrereklamo na ang taas ng premium ng PhilHealth tumataas, pero ang benepisyo nila hindi pa rin ganyan. Kaya meron pa rin silang nakokolektang premium na mas mataas.
Ang ating problema sa PhilHealth subsidy kasi, Mr. President, is yung formula is provided by law. Yan po, that is the long and short of it. Ngayon, by giving zero subsidy, are we in effect saying that we are suspending the provisions in the Universal Healthcare Act and the syntax law? So thank you for correcting me. In the syntax law, which provides for that formula, which we discussed during I think during the budget deliberations. We mentioned the formula. So is that what we're doing? Number one, kasi when you give a government agency zero budget, talagang number one ang message doon punishment mo yan. Okay. And then but number two, merong rito na there is a formula. And the formula yields I think around 74.4 billion pesos ang paggamitin yung formula. Hindi pala 73, I will correct myself. 53.13 billion pesos ang may-yield nung formula, Mr. President, around that amount. So, is it also our message that we are suspending the formula found under the sin tax law?
Mr. President, we are not suspending the implementation of a law. What we are saying is that at the moment, it is an unfunded program or law of the government. You know, we have more than 1 trillion pesos of unfunded laws in the country. Maraming mga batas pero nagkukulang ang pondo para dito. Ngayon, the GAA in itself is also a law. I understand the Senate minority leaders mentioned, but this is earmarked. Earmarked ito, so dapat doon talaga napupunta. Pero yung BIR, for example, has also that earmark na they are able to harness or benefit from 1% of their total collections. But because they haven't really reached a certain utilization, the government has not given them that 1% supposedly that would go to them. So, Mr. President, this is not, sadly, the reality is this is not uncommon. And the GAA itself is a law. We have a discretion also to look at the macro picture of a particular time in our society and economy and to see what fiscal space we have.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. But unfortunately, I think when we apply the formula for what is to be remitted to Philhealth under the UHCA, this is based on actual revenues or collections. So, wala pong reason na masabi nating it will be an unfunded mandate kasi if the collection is zero, percentage of zero is zero, pero may collection eh. So we have to, if the sponsor will allow me to read para the provisions. No? Ano ba dapat ang binibigay sa Philhealth? Utos ng Universal Healthcare Act. Revenues from excise tax on sugar-sweetened beverages. 50% of total revenue shall be allocated, may word pa na exclusively, to Philhealth, 80% nito. 80% of the 50%, tama? To Philhealth, okay. Revenues from excise tax on alcohol products. 50% of total revenue shall be allocated exclusively to Philhealth, to the tune of 80% of that 50%. Revenues from excise tax on tobacco products. 50% of total excise tax collection from tobacco products shall be exclusively allocated to Philhealth to the tune of 80% of that 50%. And then revenues from excise tax on heated tobacco products and vapor products, from the total revenues, Philhealth must be given 80%. For the implementation of the Universal Healthcare Act. And then, sa pagkakaintindi ko, ito na yon. That is why umabot tayo sa 74.43 billion sa NEP because health insurance coverage under sin tax law amounting to 53.13 billion pesos to be used for health insurance premiums of indirect contributors. Plus, inad doon yung 21.17 billion pesos benefit package improvement under the Universal Healthcare Law, plus a smaller amount of 127.5 million pesos special purpose insurance, million lang po yun, 127.5 million pesos special purpose insurance coverage for the health insurance premiums of the beneficiaries under Pamana program. Pag isuma total lahat yun yung 74.43 billion pesos na nasa NEP as subsidy to Philhealth. Pero meron pa nag-dispute na hindi yan tama, di ba? Although I must hasten to add na meron pa nga nagdi-dispute dyan that if you properly apply the formula, it should even be a bigger amount than the 74.43 billion pesos. That's the point, Mr. President. And then na-zero na natin. And then admittedly, ang destinasyon nung na-free up na 74.4 billion pesos, aminado tayong hindi sa directly health purposes, Mr. President. So that's what happened to Philhealth, Mr. President. So it's a different. This is my opinion, Mr. President. The subsidy for Philhealth is in the nature of is like an automatic appropriation because the law provides for the formula. Parang ministerial act na lang sa DBM to determine the amount under the formula and then give it as a subsidy. Minimum amount of subsidy kasi itong mga benefit packages, dagdag na po yan. Pero minimum amount of subsidy is determined by law. So when we are discussing general principles ng budget, when they mention automatic appropriations, ang instruction nila sa Congress, you cannot touch automatic appropriations because the appropriation is provided by law. So that's the point of this representation, Mr. President.
Mr. President, if I may, there are also other laws that specify that the government will automatically appropriate. But then the reality is, even if the government wanted to, it hasn't been able to appropriate, as I mentioned, more than 1 trillion pesos worth of funds that belong to that should have funded certain laws that have been passed. So, Mr. President, I think we can argue about this all day. I understand the point of the minority leader. What I'm just saying is that with discretion also of the legislative body, we believe that the 600 billion of Philhealth is for them to be able to utilize. They are not definitely destitutes. They have the funding for it. And if they also show their capability to utilize those funds, next year, definitely it will be a different scenario once we evaluate the progress that they have made. Because we can go back and forth to this, and as the minority leader has said, that doesn't stop him from questioning this from another independent body, the judiciary, to the matter.
Yes.
But we stand by the fact that the GA is also a law, looking at the snapshot of hopefully the next year and how we will be able to fund all our priority projects.
So, Mr. President, yun lang, I'm just pointing this out na we may be inviting another case before the Supreme Court because under the theory that the GAA, if we pass this, is amending